Welcome to Brewsers, a podcast about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. I am your host, Rody John, and today we speak to Remington Rhor. We talk all about how he got started working at a brewery and deathmatch wrestling. This is such a fun conversation. As you'll hear, we had an amazing time. We talked about all things pro wrestling, hardcore, and even Christmas. It was amazing. I loved it. While you're doing that, in enjoying this lovely conversation I'm about to have with Remington Rhor, make sure to sign up for our newsletter. It comes out twice a week. You get even more information about our guest. You get fun facts, and you get to find out what's happening with your favorite podcast, all about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. So without further ado, here is Remington Rhor. I would like to welcome to the show Remington Rhor. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So for everybody listening, kind of paint us a word picture. Where are you at? What's going on around you?
Currently, I've left the gym, so I've just stopped at the grocery store. Some pre-leg day or post-leg day food, satiate the body and help it grow. So.
Well, I wanted to ask that later, but you brought it up. I noticed when you go further in your Instagram, you were doing way more powerlifting stuff, and recently it does look like you've leaned down quite a bit. What were you doing when you were doing powerlifting? Because it looks like you do have a trophy, but then you transitioned into, leaning down more. I guess kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so my mother was a competitive bodybuilder, a competitive powerlifter, so I started training pretty early on how to lift properly and grow my body strength and size wise. And eventually, and when I was still living in Kansas, I found a group of guys that were in the gym and caught me when I was heavy, like, hey, you should come do a meet. So I was like, I'm not really strong enough, but I'll try. So I went to my first. Actually, I won my first meet, which was cool, and then I definitely got the competitive bug in that because I'm a pretty competitive person. And I went and did competitive powerlifting for a handful of years, and then I got into while wrestling, which was not earlier in my career, which is probably not the smartest thing because now I have residual hip issues from a combination of both. But eventually I kind of had to either make the choice of do powerlifting and do that competitively or wrestle and do that more often because my body was taking a toll that it couldn't catch up from. So. That makes sense.
So when you switched over, how much, because obviously your body was so used to lifting obviously a certain amount of weight. And so when you're going maybe back down or even adding cardio which obviously, being in the wrestling world, you kind of have to have a little bit of cardio. How do you still kind of lift heavy or do you kind of, have you waned it down a bit?
I still lift relatively heavy for sure. I can't lift as heavy in certain as I did before. My deadlift has gone down. That's honestly from injury powerlifting. The squat's coming back. I used to squat about mid 600s. I'm sitting about low 5s right now, so that's going back. But my bench is still pretty heavy. My head press is still pretty heavy. I like to really keep my strength in and make sure I'm strong enough to throw around other hosses in the ring. So
that is something you definitely need to keep your strength for because that's not going to be something you are going to stop doing at this point.
Right.
So what kind of cardio do you kind of mix in now?
I kind of do a combination of I guess it's low impact, high intensity cardio at the gym. Really high incline treadmill, and then I'll do cardio as well. I used to box for a couple of years, so I kind of like that training. So I'll hit the heavy bag or hit the speed bag when I have time.
My old house, we had in the garage, we had a heavy bag, and I missed that so much. And I Would like to find a gym that does have one, but I know they're out there. They cost a little more money.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. My gym's got a hanging bag, a pretty heavy hanging bag, and jump rope and stuff like that. Because we have a kind of a wide array of athletes and regular gym folks in the gym, so it's got a little bit of everything for everybody.
Very nice. Well, let's go all the way back in time. What is your earliest memory of pro wrestling?
Oh man, my earliest memory is probably, I think I played the games before I ever watched wrestling. my cousins, who are like my older brothers, like were definitely in the wrestling in the mid to late '90s. Big Rock fans, big Stone Cold fans, big Mankind fans, and they had those old like N64, NWO No Mercy games. So the good ones, And I used to play those pretty frequently, and I was probably like 8 or 9. And I always would pick like the monster characters. I would pick Big Show. I would pick Undertaker. I'd pick Mankind. Because I'm always been a monster kid. So love my big views and Bigfoots and stuff like that. So
how tall are you and how much do you weigh?
I'm 6 foot and currently about 245.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah, so I'm not super tall, but my height does start with a 6, so I still count as tall.
Unless you're on a dating app, and then you'd have to be over 6'2", which I find to be fucking hilarious.
Has that gone up? That's one.
I don't know. I have a girlfriend, so I'm not on the dating apps, but I hear that like a lot of guys that are, I'm 6 foot as well. Somehow we're short because we're not 6'2" and above. And I'm like, in what world are we the short ones here? Like, I don't understand that.
I might have lost you.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, no, I was saying that, like, from what I hear on the dating apps, that if you're not over 6'2", then somehow you're short. And, like, as a man who's also 6 foot, I'm like, I don't quite understand how we're the short ones here.
Yeah, that's wild to me, man. Usually, I've always, like, heard if it starts with a 6, you're fine. But, I mean, I haven't been on a dating app in a very, very long time. No need for that. So.
It's a wild west out there, and better luck to everybody that is out there on those, because I recommend going out in real life and in meeting people is, I think, the best way to do it. But I'm an old school guy like that.
Well, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Now, how did you make the transition into actually, I'm going to be a pro wrestler?
So that's kind of a multi-step. I would say when I was younger, around like 10 or 11 is when I got like really into wrestling. And my childhood best friend was also a really big wrestling fan. So we did what all wrestling fans do when they're kids and start backyarding. Mm-hmm. The old Matt Hardy method. So we did that for a while. Eventually that kind of fell to the wayside. Me and the childhood friend kind of went separate ways for X reasons, but I got really into music because I'm a musician as well. So started around probably right about when I started college. I get a call from a childhood friend, and he's like, "Hey, man." And I was like, "Well, what's up?" I'm talking a while. He's like, "You ever still like have thoughts about getting in the wrestling ring?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I'm, currently training, currently wrestling. Do you want to come get in the ring and, have a training day?" I was like, kind of baffled. I was like, "Seriously?" He's like, "Yeah, it's about an hour and a half from where you are, coming out, training, see how it feels." So I went out there about an hour from my hometown of Wichita, Kansas, and took my first bump. And I was like, I actually really like this, and started. I mean, that was like, it was funny because my trainer was like, "So you're just taking bumps on just dirt and like the ground?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "This is gonna feel a lot nicer." But I took that first bump and went through it 9 months of training three times a week. Driving an hour and a half from my hometown to get out there and prove that I wasn't just there to mess around. And eventually I had my first match about 9 months later.
That's awesome. So I imagine you kind of, when you're coming in, you kind of take whatever match you can get and then try to get experience. Obviously wrestling different guys, and obviously veterans will come along at some point. How do you end up in your first death match and then realize, oh, I love this. This is my bread and butter?
So when I first started training, that's definitely like the things that I really wanted to do. Is like I wanted to do deathmatch. I wanted to do hardcore.
Okay.
Like that's where I wanted to go. But I knew, like, obviously I had to get that. Well, I had to get wrestling under my belt because deathmatch wrestling is still wrestling. So I wanted to get years under my belt and reps under my belt and have lots of in-ring experience before I decided to be like, oh, okay, cool, let's add blast to this. Let's add barbed wire to this. And also having a chance to level up matches as I go on, because, I'm not going to be like, all right, let's do a hardcore match. Let's do flaming pains. Like, that's a little, you have to let the car warm up before you get to 100 miles an hour, you know what I'm saying? So, but that was my goal. And eventually, after a while, I told my trainer, I'm like, hey, this is what I want to do. And he's like, you sure that's the path you want to take? I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, that's what you want to do. We'll try and make that happen. So he had a buddy of his named Chewy Martinez. He's one of JCW's main guys. That's Juggalo Championship Wrestling. So he kind of gave me a little bit of an in to this spot in Indianapolis called Asylum Wrestling Revolution, which is AWR. Mm-hmm. And I made a 11.5-hour drive on a chance to see if I could. And I went out there and I worked 4 or 5 shows, and every show I went to, and I was like, hey, can I get a chance to be in a death match? Because I've done hardcore matches before that. Like I did tables, chairs, barbed wire, thumbtacks, but I was like, hey, let me be in a full-on death match. And so after a while, really trying to dig in, I'm like, hey, I'm trying to do this and not just get my cool bloody pictures and leave. And then eventually they gave me my first match with the legend that is Madman Pondo.
Oh. Yeah, I watched the 3-way earlier with you and him and Dr.
Redacted?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the cinder blocks, and I was like, phew.
Yeah, I've taken that spot a lot.
Yeah, I saw other videos on YouTube as well that you also had taken that spot a lot.
That's the one way I've ever beat Pondo, is I got hit with a sledgehammer to the head. It's the only time I've ever beat him.
Ah, full circle storytelling. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that when ECW was happening, obviously that's the hardcore wrestling and extreme that people kind of thought was just blood and guts, even though they had a mix of everything, kind of the way modern day GCW does. And then obviously we know about what happened over in Japan with Cactus Jack, Terry Funk, and the death matches over there. And then now the deathmatch scene over here has grown, in so many different ways. And I've always thought that wrestling is like a buffet. You need a bit of everything because you never know what somebody is really going to gravitate to. And then, I go to GCW shows, and I see fans at GCW shows I don't see at any other wrestling show in the Metroplex. And I'm like, how do you know about this? But then there's wrestling over here that I've never seen you at. It's always very interesting to me to see who enjoys what. And obviously, everyone's going to enjoy a little bit of everything, or just some of this and some of that. Now, when it comes to deathmatch wrestling, I know it's not just blood and guts, but there are people out there that just think it's